Before I continue with this tale, I feel it's necessary, I feel compelled to pay you a well-earned compliment. You, yes, you, have diligently remained steadfast and firm as my story has unfolded. Much of what I have told you must seem outrageous and unbelievable, not unlike some masculine tavern talk or tacky publicity stunt. Yet, during this time, did you shake your head and toss this madness into the garbage? No! Instead, you lap at it, suck at it even, as if this brochure were the last luscious teat in the land of literature. You are no quitter, my friend. No, not at all. And you have earned my admiration. I also believe we share something in common on this point. In my research, I have seen that many companies spend an exorbitant amount of time planning what the industry calls an exit strategy. But I no longer believe in such a thing. There seems little point in pursuing a goal if in the back of your mind you leave yourself a means of escape. From my readings, there seems to be a consensus reality that governs most on this issue. Apparently, it does not govern us. In ancient warfare, even generals had theaters of combat. An astute man of action would often engage in battles where he knew he had little chance of success. In these cases, the commander often maneuvered his troops into a precarious position near a coastline, a large river, or perhaps a cliff. Although this might seem at first counterintuitive, the reason becomes clear when you understand the mental acumen of the primitive savage mind, or in my case, actors. When people perceive a way out, an easy path, they will take it as soon as order breaks down and fear appears. If the only means of escape is to win or be thrown into the abyss, then you will fight with the might of 100 men. This is the same way I feel about my chosen devotion. I have not gone through all these difficulties for nothing. Instead, I have done all for lot. Anyway, when you have hired us, you shall take the profit of it. Had I planned an exit strategy, I would have taken it long ago. Certainly after having an apparition accost me in my bedroom. But debate along that topic is unsuited for further discussion here. And so, on with the show. A year goes by. I had made it my business to understand as much as I could about what was happening to me. The memory of what I'd experienced in that attic was ever present in my thoughts. One thing was clear. Whether friend or foe, his visit was a revelation of the ethereal and a validation of the supernatural that made me feel special. Besides, I had an inkling, a strong impression that it was wise to heed his counsel. Now, I don't make mistakes. When I put something down on paper, it is always with the utmost brutal intention. Furthermore, I often find that I'm strangely aware of what others near me are thinking. Nor are you immune to this power, little listener. Beware of your judgments about me. They will only hinder you. The word mistake implies a lack of intention, but here there is always intention. It is always only a question of whose. Trust me, everything you hear in this brochure has the gravest importance. The presence I had come to know as Clyde motivated me into action. After several months of wearing the brown squirrel suit and searching for work, I at last secured some serious employment as a real estate agent. Fortunately, my new sales position afforded me not only the money to survive, but also a degree of freedom, which I eagerly used to my own ends. I felt possessed of a new spirit of vitality, and as this new job required me to drive about, I used the opportunity to peddle my shows at local restaurants along the route. As once before, I could feel the winds at my back and fortune flowing beneath me, bearing me aloft in all that I endeavored to do. Indeed, my head swam with a school of wishes. Synchronicity seemed evident everywhere around me, as if the universe itself had altered its very architecture for my plans. If he was real, anything could be. It seemed but a sieve separated my dreams from the earth. My sleep leaking, pouring through the floorboards, dripping into the reality below. As an actor, I had seen plenty of stage tricks and illusions, sleight of hand and magic, prestidigitations, as it were. But this was different. This was tangible. What was I dabbling in? This became a constant thought, but these reservations did not stop me from taking action. In addition to slowly growing the number of shows, I worked diligently on writing a new script, one that I felt would give us an able advantage. I devised a concept that truly might allow us to do but one show a year. We called it Conundrums. I even felt confident enough to begin dating again, and had met an attractive blonde whose presence encouraged me to work even harder. Opportunity seemed to be everywhere and in every action. My luck was changing once more, and I was growing increasingly hungry. The perfect time to resume sales calls. Whispers began to spread among restaurateurs that the man calling himself Riddle something or other had returned. He had a bad reputation as a blowhard bully with an icy intellect. Rumors of this dangerous salesman peddling mystery shows echoed through the dimly lit corridors of the food service industry. Taverns, hotels, banqueting facilities, country clubs, all were in my daily crosshairs. Though I had little in the way of a running show, I did have my brochure, my wits, and a wizardly coat rack. Let the buyer beware. Of course, as always, these things are a numbers game. The more calls, the more leads, the more deals. One must come to enjoy failure, even play with it. Nevertheless, it can be emotionally draining dealing with belligerents barely concealed behind civil words, as can be demonstrated by a sales call I made at a winery in southern New Jersey.
Hello, sir. Do you have a banquet room? Great. May I speak with your manager?
You're talking to him. What do you want?
Ever consider a murder mystery show?
If you're not booking anything here, we're done.
Entertainment and wine tasting events could pack this place.
Nobody wants that crap.
Really? It's been very successful. Let me show you this brochure.
Get the hell out of here.
I can show you some video. The audience goes wild when...
I said out.
How about I shove that wine bottle up your fat fucking ass?
Get the fuck out!
Obviously, they didn't all go like that. Exuberance only goes so far, and some folks have no damn sense of humor. Yet, despite the less successful sales moments, some could be very lucrative, as was the case when I called an old historic inn that I came across one afternoon. I popped in, as I usually do, to find an older woman busy talking on the phone. I smiled, waited patiently, and tried to listen in to feel out my mark. It took only a few moments for me to discover that the woman's title was Special Events Coordinator. Always a good sign. More than that, she was having a discussion with a theater company at that very moment. It was an argument about performing a date in September. The call did not end well.
Sorry about that. I'm dealing with a very difficult person. Can I help you?
I represent a local theater company. Here's our brochure.
She took it.
Do you have a Christmas show?
Well, I don't have a cast, but I have a script.
Definitely. It's one of our best sellers. Very funny, very family-friendly.
Do you have December 12th available?
She asked. Yes.
Let me check my schedule. Terrific. I do have that date available for you today.
Great! You're hired.
Oh, yeah! Within a few days of that encounter, the other theater company was tossed out, and we replaced them. This turn of fortune overjoyed me so much that honestly it is beyond even my eminent ability as a writer to describe it to you. In fact, I achieved so many events from that client that it would be downright arrogant and boastful of me to tell you. It was 16. These bookings and my real estate work resuscitated the company and enabled me to stitch together a deal whereby a new house could be acquired, a new anchorage from which I could pilot my ship of fate and better navigate the waters of its rebirth. I promised myself that this time I would not return to my mother's ghastly garret. I would never again suffer the stigma of failure, carrying it around like old keys on a chain. No. I would see my aims made real or meet the abyss. I felt that it was also high time for me to update my brochure, it being several years since I had done so. I lengthened it with some new pricing, coupons, and descriptive content for our customers to peruse. I additionally included a few stories novelizing our history, some of which you are already acquainted with. Do not think this strange. I have always felt that while our competition makes do with puny brochures, we flaunt our long one. After all, the longer the brochure, the deeper the economic penetration. During this revision, I also included a map of our service area to help our customers better understand the boundaries of our wanderlust. I tried my best to be as clear and exact as I could about the geography of our general location. Yet, in all honesty, often as I drew the illustration, I seemed to drift. It was as if the daydreamer within me filled in those areas of the map that my conscious mind failed to evoke. Perhaps it was simply the normal cognitive dissonance that comes from living in both the real and unreal worlds, as most actors do. Well, I'll let you be the judge. You'll see the results of my cartography if you actually buy the brochure. My new abode on Lowmaster Street was ideal for my plans. The space served several functions as a storage unit, rehearsal space, workshop, and lastly, as your writer's accommodation. The town itself was quite depressed, a state of affairs I promised myself to avoid. Its main street, though composed mostly of empty storefronts, retained a strange sense of history and opportunity. The noise of the train a block distant and the frequent police sirens had served as a convenient pretense which allowed me to beat the seller down on the sales price and acquire the property for a steal. Many of the buildings nearby were boarded up, and the ones that weren't probably should have been. My new residence was a long, boxcar-style row home in which one might peer through every room on the first floor from either end. Its large open downstairs and abundant square footage more than made up for its ungentrified surroundings. There were few residents of my complexion, but to be honest, I had no need of neighbors. However, there was an old white woman next door, apparently one of the last strongholds in the neighborhood. She was glad to see that I had purchased the property and had always made a point to be pleasant during my visits there before the closing. On the day that I moved in, as one might imagine, I was very busy moving boxes and furniture from my old vandal truck into my new home. Around 6 o'clock, Craig, Ozzy, and I were just finishing up.
Guys, I can't tell you how thankful I am for your help today.
I said.
Sure you can,
returned Ozzy.
It was my pleasure, boss. Keep those gigs coming in.
Craig said.
Will do.
Hey, this is totally random, but can I borrow the big cowboy hat? I got a kid's birthday party I'm playing Saturday, and they want me to dress Western.
The minstrel asked.
Yeah, no problem. It's in the truck. Thanks again. I owe you both.
The two of them jumped into a car and squealed out of the parking lot for apparently no reason. It was not until they drove off that I noticed the old heavy-set woman emerge from her side door dressed in a bathrobe, a light blue garment that hadn't been in fashion since the 70s. I moved over to the truck for some more boxes. Although I was clearly busy moving the last of my belongings, she interrupted me to make conversation.
It's a wonderful little town,
she said while fiddling with a small paper bag.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
I carried an armload out of the truck, shifting the box in my hands for a better handhold. The box had not been taped properly, causing the cardboard to distort as I held it, so much so that I feared it would come apart at the bottom. Written on the side of it were the words, "Missing Costumes."
Not what it used to be, but it's coming back,
she said.
They're fixing up the old houses and chasing out the riffraff.
I grunted slightly, hoping that she would get the point. This was not the best time for a chat, but by the time I reached the gate to my small backyard, she asked me a direct question, obliging me to stop again and suffer an answer.
Why did you move here?
She asked. I put the box down on the sidewalk, carefully holding the bottom. I wiped the sweat off my face before answering.
I moved here because,
Once I finished my lengthy explanation, I reached down for the box again.
Ah, then you're going to love it here. Never any trouble with crime, not on this street.
While she spoke, she began drawing handfuls of birdseed from the paper bag and tossing it onto the narrow alley that separated our houses. The distance between the buildings was not great, and half the mess landed on my yard. Her chatter slowly became accompanied by the flutter of pigeons and a squirrel sneaking in for an easy snack.
Oh, aren't they adorable? Oh, look at how cute they are.
The cooing brought my eyes up to my roof, where many more birds were perched. Below these birds ran streaks of droppings, staining the vinyl siding, a detail I had somehow overlooked during my home inspection.
These are my little babies, my little darlings.
She said as much to herself as to me. Another large squirrel, slower and more aged, scampered along the power line to get a closer look at the action. As the woman went on, I watched as it trapezed from the wire to my roof, then skulked its way down to the alley to join the feast.
Oh, look at you.
She continued.
You must be so hungry.
I'd better finish up. Sun's going down. Nice talking to you again.
I picked up the box with a groan and made my way through the metal gate in the fence and into my back door. Once inside, I sat the weighty item down on the carpet and stood for a moment, hoping to give her time to go inside. But impatience eventually drove me back for another box and perhaps a quick end to the chore. When I emerged, I noticed that several more of the rodents had gathered for the frenzy, swiftly shoving seed into their mouths, like prisoners guarding their meals from fellow inmates. Their eyes darted towards me as they chewed. Once the old woman saw me, she too resumed smacking her jowls.
Squirrels are my favorite little creatures. They're all around, but you hardly notice until you feed them. Oh, look at you, my little darlings. Eat up. I'm sure you're starving after the winter. So adorable, don't you think?
Sure.
I said as I leaned into the back of the truck.
Do you have any family around here?
No, they left a long time ago.
She said, while I picked up a heavy milk crate filled with books, their weight making me question why I had kept them. I walked as quickly as I could toward my back door.
People are funny nowadays.
She said, continuing to talk to me even as I walked out of sight. I slid the crate onto the kitchen counter and overheard her voice through the open window, speaking as if I was still there. When I finally emerged again, I caught the last of her sentence.
Anyway, it doesn't matter to me much. I have my little friends to keep me company now. Don't you, sweeties?
I pushed open the metal gate with a squeak and stretched my arms in preparation for another load. Quickening my pace to the truck again, the waning sun beamed its remaining rays through the trees and the rooftops behind the house. I wanted to get this over with, to get inside and relax. As I moved, I saw her appear from the corner of my eye. She scattered another rain of seed into the street while she made an annoying, repetitive kissing sound.
Oh, yes, you're going to love it here. Nice people. Nice people on this street.
She remarked while my back was still turned.
It's not as bad as they say.
I grabbed another cardboard box and a trash bag filled with clothing and turned around. When I did, I was alarmed to see that the number of birds had nearly doubled, and the gathering of those brown patchy beggars had swollen as well. So many had appeared, and so swiftly I nearly lost my grip on the bag. Slowly, I moved back towards my gate. At my approach, some of the birds flew off, but the squirrels stood their ground without fear.
Boy, they must like you. They never get that close to me.
She returned to her puckering sound effects.
Do you really need to throw that much food?
The kissing stopped suddenly as the last word left my lips. When she turned in my direction, the sounds of cooing birds and clicking rodents seemed to expire as well. Her previous expression of fake cordiality died away to reveal a strange, savage bitterness. Her scowl, highlighting every wrinkle and narrowing her watery gray eyes. The awkwardness of her changed demeanor persuaded me to walk faster, but just before I ducked out of view, she spoke again.
Some people hate animals. Call them pests.
I made it to the porch, but although I was out of sight, I stood still, listening to what she said.
They're just hungry. They tell me they are. It's not animals you have to worry about. It's people. It's people you can't read.
I set the box down and walked back outside without looking at her.
Yeah, you got a big heart, lady.
I said, darting for the open truck. The sun was reduced to a sliver by then, darkening the scene and casting long shadows into the alley. I leaned back into the truck and grabbed my makeup kit, the last item in line. I had the sudden urge to open it, but left it closed instead.
Yeah, they're lucky to have you.
I pulled out the kit and closed the truck doors.
Yes,
She returned quickly as I lifted it and turned around.
I am lucky to have them.
She threw another handful of seed into the street. Her motions scattered most of the birds while the squirrels boldly remained. Although the truck was empty now, it seemed wise to lock it anyway, and so I put the rusty padlock on and gave it a tug as a test.
Oh, there you go, my little sweeties. Plenty more where that came from.
I tried to avoid looking at her and the animals, but just before I could make the turn around the corner, one of the haggard little mammals drew my eye. It was the old one, large, ill-formed, and rat-like. Its bulbous eyes glared at me as it masticated, dark, whiteless eyes that reflected nothing but blackness. Yet I gazed into them like an addiction, unable to break away.
Ah, isn't he adorable?
She asked, as it filled its mouth with her offering at a great rate. My vision zoomed in on the little beast. Its teeth vibrated as it ate, its jowls idling like an old diesel. Wild, uneven hairs twitched around its mouth, its claws ungracefully grappling a wad of seed. I looked away toward my back door and almost took a step before I heard the old woman's voice again.
When I was a little girl, the world was different. Now, everyone's a liar. Everyone's a cheat. Ooh.
She muttered, then returned to her kissy-kissy sounds. I turned back. The gaunt, clutching pack had not taken their eyes off me. The larger and closest of the creatures seemed to be their leader. The side of his chewing face was torn, perhaps by some fight with another of its ilk. From the wound trailed an amber-like pus that had hardened into its hairs. The bottom of its left eyelid also drooped, exposing green, crusty tears that built up and clogged its puffy rim. Yet the eye itself never blinked, only stared. Still more mesmerizing to me was my shadow, long and thin from the glare. It closed the distance between me and that thing, creating an unwelcome intimacy. So close was the end of my dark twin to this little creature that I shuddered at the thought of it. Suddenly, its head darted sideways. As more of its profile became visible, I could see the left side of its lip was gone, revealing its jagged teeth as it gnashed the remainder of the food in its maw. The weight of the makeup case, whose handle was but a chain, began to dig into my hand.
Oh, cute little babies, my angels.
I stood frozen, misshapen, filthy, crunching, drooling rodents lurking about. What is she seeing? Is this woman blind? They were not cute, not friends. They were repulsive. Their evil was an objective fact. Their gaze, like occult gravity, pulled at my spirit, pulling it down. The closeness of my shadow to them became more unpleasant with every passing second. I longed to move, yet could not muster the will to do it. The light around me suddenly darkened. The sun, finally eclipsed by the rooftops. I know what you are, I thought, as the creature and I continued our stare down. Gra-gra. A bird crowed from the rooftop. A bird with purple feathers on its head. Then, without warning and without blinking, the thing reached out its claw and stepped upon my shadow's crown, cocking its head smugly. I dropped the makeup case onto the sidewalk with a loud smash. The idea that the mirror within had broken entered into my mind unbidden. Some of the wildlife fled at the sound, some, but not all. The old woman looked at me as I reached down to pick up the case. I noticed my hand trembling slightly as I took the chain link handle into my grasp.
Getting late.
I said.
See you later.
I darted into my house, closed the door, and bolted it shut. From the outside and through the window, I could barely hear her whisperings to the creatures.
You're going to like our new neighbor, aren't you, little cuties?
My bedroom was on the third floor in the attic, as was my custom. It was a perfect fit for both me and my aspirations, yet as the weather cooled, the drafty nature of the house revealed itself. As of late, I had been unable to remember some of my dreams, so I kept a notebook on my person at all times, eager to record any clues that I could. The cold of the house was biting. It was necessary to wrap myself in a duvet, pointing the full blast of a small electric heater at my feet. I remember enjoying the smell of the hot air blowing past the glowing red wires, which likely approximated the experience of breathing through a toaster. Everyone breathes through toasters, right? Anyhow, I worked meticulously at my desk, a workspace containing all the needed items and more. Pens, paper, my new pair of glasses, and the small golden face that bounced into this world from some other. I had examined it over and over since discovering it, and found its maskish qualities nothing but a puzzle. It was impossible not to dwell upon the mystery. My mind constantly licked at it as a tongue strokes a broken tooth. Small as a nickel, it required the use of a magnifying glass to see its more minute characteristics. Its eyes were but holes, as was its smiling mouth. The entirety of its features unnatural and planned. The aspect and general qualities of the item seemed reminiscent of zodiacal signs or perhaps ancient hieroglyphs. Besides the eye holes was a furrow in its brow that opened on one side, a hook-like structure that seemed to indicate it connected to another. Resting it on the tip of my index finger, I peered at the little face and noticed behind it the lines of my own fingerprints. This came from my dream, a real place. There is something behind our world, listener, something I was then just discovering, something that I understand well now. You yourself have heard me speak of them so far. The likeness is the same. Indeed, I studied the tiny relic as closely as you're now studying my voice. As I examined it further, I noticed a strange, emotional awareness I had not felt before. The lines of its features, its nose, chin, and sockets of its eyes seemed to suggest a hidden future. As a fortune-teller might pry a man's fate from lifelines, I felt I might read some meaning in its countenance. Speak, little mouth. Tell me what you are. There had been hundreds in my dream. Hundreds that flew out of that chest and tumbled everywhere. Although I had searched every inch of the attic the following morning, I had found nothing. Have only you survived, little man? What might I find by catching your kin? The face did not answer, but I didn't need it to. I could make it speak nonetheless. I became so intrigued by this concept that I located books from the local library about dream interpretation, psychic phenomenon, physiognomy, a tome that explained the ancient practice of divination from the form of a face. I told no one else of this, of course, but I was quite sure of one thing. Where one could be found, others certainly could, and I knew that I must seek them. I heard a distant knocking noise. Perhaps the old woman, I supposed, but as the neighborhood was not the safest, my second thought was that there was an intruder in the house. I stood up, the drab green coverlet over my shoulders still skirting the floor. From a stack of boxes, I picked up a stage combat sword and slowly moved toward the front door. The yellow light of the lamp flashed along the blade as I approached. Dull, I thought, but killing a thief with a sword would make good press. I checked the front door, locked, so I made my way to the back door, all the while listening to the alarming sounds. Without the windows, there was nothing but boot-black night and the howl of an unhappy cat, mating, perhaps against its will. Searching about the rest of my place yielded nothing to answer my concerns. My new address quickly filled me with a new sense of hapless nakedness. Scratching, crawling, rustling noises, too sporadic to be human, too small, too multitudinous. I stood still for a minute or two to let the sounds grow louder in my ears and perhaps give my memory time to reclassify them. Slowly, I kneeled on the ground and then slouched down upon it. The floorboards were cold to the touch and bowed a little beneath my weight. I slid myself quietly along, listening, eventually coming to a small crack where the boards hit tile at the kitchen doorsill. I slowly lowered my head and eventually placed my naked ear over the thin fissure. I jumped up to my feet, threw my hand to my ear, and dropped the sword with a loud clang. Something was under the floors and moving in multiple directions. Squirrels! I paced around for a few minutes, but had no idea what I might do. But after a few minutes, the noises stopped, and so I tried to relax. There seemed to be nothing else I could really do but go back to bed. I tried in vain to ignore it all. I promised myself it would not disturb my good cheer. Nonetheless, they harassed me with an impish nerve. When I walked out in the morning, the seeds on the sidewalk seemed to struggle with each other, vying for the chance to mock me first. When I stumbled up to my bed, I could hear numberless creatures tearing at the wires behind the walls. These antagonisms would not be content with my neighbor's charity. No, they had to come with insides, gradually chewing the very solidity from beneath my feet. I began to piece together, one by one, all my experience with these dreadful animals. From the beginning, crawling on the stucco walls outside my mother's attic, in the high trees of my dreams, roosting on my bedpost, and now nourished by my neighbor. Fate had even forced me to don their disgusting form as a part-time job. These little running gags had always been present, and now their progressing conspiracy had become this, an infestation. What do you want from me? Whenever I would sit to write my new script, their bothersome noises seemed more and more insistent. Then, days later, I turned to find one sitting on my living room floor, as if listening to my very thoughts. Its brown, scrawny body was covered with damp, matted, and filthy fur that put off an unwholesome stench. Impulsively, I grabbed a microphone off the shelf and threw it at the vermin as hard as I could, missing it, of course, and sending the animal running for cover. Inside the walls was bad enough, but in the house was unpardonable. During the daylight, I circled the dwelling, searching for their ingress. Quickly, I discovered several holes under the eaves and in the soffit through which they were making their entrance. I and the goofy minstrel set to work, nailing wire mesh into the holes, then covering them with a metal flashing to stop their dread effects. During this episode, I caught my neighbor watching us from her window before hurriedly drawing the curtains at my eye contact. Craig found the whole situation more amusing than I did, and even put his thoughts to an 80s song.
Squirrels, squirrels, squirrels. Long tail's gonna make you well. Squirrels, squirrels, squirrels. They got balls gonna eat your walls.
I'm going to beat him with that damn ukulele. Eventually, we had managed to fortify all the weak points on the lower stories, yet days later, a new hole appeared. This more current breach cut into the top of the 3rd floor, reachable only by a very, very tall ladder over the narrow street. Once again, I tried to ignore it, but after several nights of gnashing teeth and popping breakers, I realized that I would have to act. Several pest control companies were called, but the costs were high due to the dangerous nature of the newest portal that I couldn't afford any of them. The mine these creatures dug into my house would have to be closed, and I would have to do it myself. I borrowed a long old ladder and began my ascent, teetering hazardously next to the road. Once I reached the top, I found that the power lines to the house were also treacherously obstructing my progress. Contorting myself dangerously, I inspected the hole. At once, I was assaulted by a potent and horrible smell. The void respired a gag-inducing vapor, exhaling a puke perfume that conjured the idea within me of awaking beside a week's dead corpse. Its gangrenous mouth casting its breath upon me. Slowly, I employed a pair of pliers to extract the wet twigs and other fetid mess that nasty creature secreted into their lair. It was a broad, deep cavity, winding covertly into the unseen labyrinth within the structure. As I leaned in to work, my face came closer to the opening, so near that I almost thought that I could hear the ocean within, as holding a conch to the ear sometimes does. My position was precarious. The ladder swayed with every movement, a fact that made me all the more anxious to get down. I tugged the last piece of debris out of the void when I saw something peeking out of the blackness. I pulled a small penlight from my pocket, twisted it on, and shined it in. What caught the light astounded me. Buried within the rotting fibers was a sparkle of something gold. I reached for it, but a sudden vibration shook the ladder, compelling me to quickly grab the gutters. The penlight tumbled down and dashed upon the sidewalk. I took a deep breath before my renewed attempt to see what was in the hole, but without light I could make out only the faintest sense that it was small and metallic. Another one? I stretched in to reach it, feeling the wood cracking beneath and a queer, squatty snarl at some distance within. I was just barely able to pinch it with my pointer and middle finger and slowly draw it out. Whatever it was tangled and hard to extract. I could only tug an inch at a time before losing my grip on the slippery item, all while the ladder swayed unsteadily beneath my toes. The small growl grew louder, causing me to desire the thing even more before I have it. With a strong hold this time, I yanked it as fast as I could when something scratched at my finger. Panicked! I drew out my arm and looked in to see two evil, twinkling eyes, old, familiar, and baring its little teeth through a torn lip. It glared at me for a second more before nabbing the golden charm and scurrying deeper into the housetop. an action that both terrified and tormented me. I pounded my fist on the shingles in a rage. Suddenly, from below, I heard the old woman's creaking voice.
What are you doing up there?
Shut up!
I shouted as I climbed down. That sparkling object in the hole was a second golden mask, almost identical to the one I had found on the floor in my mother's attic. The very same charms that had fallen from my dreams into this world. Only one person could explain this madness, and his nickname was Clyde. Yet, since the shrew-like pests had invaded, I had had no contact with him at all. All the same, they had come from his world. I was sure of it, and it seemed to me that his will had unleashed them. What I am about to say may make you think less of me, but for the sake of the truth, I must convey it. When under a great deal of stress, I can become slightly tumultuous. I can occasionally, though not unjustly, exhibit a disturbing ill temper, an unfeigned, unpassioned rage that erupts forth from my innermost self. It is nothing abnormal, I can assure you, and my ire mainly stems from my optimistic nature. It's harmless, really, and rarely results in fines or fistfights. And arrests? Well, they're downright infrequent. So don't let yourself become aggressophobic over this mild shortcoming of mine. All that being said, I must confess that the inexplicable and evil incidents of that day drove me into an unaccustomed fury. The constant pressure of floating faces, furry creatures, and of course self-employment somewhat destabilized me. After the episode with the hole, I came down the ladder and barged through the back door in a fit. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and entered my living room, which had been commandeered as a storage unit. I sat down on a folding chair, took a sip, and looked around the room filled with bins and boxes of equipment neatly arranged on the shelves. I had painted the entire room a dark purple to create a black box space for our rehearsals, a room dedicated to the aims of that pseudo-truthful showmonger that seemed set on making a show out of me. The scurrying sounds in the walls seemed to be louder than ever before, as if they were snickering at me, rolling around in jubilation at my failed attempt to expel them. In fact, the walls themselves seemed to sing to me in the tapping beats of their little feet, as if to remind me that my own life was but a pratfall. I asked myself over and over why this darkness was spreading into my life, and the only explanation I could imagine was him, Clyde. The only one with the supernatural power to inundate me with such misfortune. What have I done wrong? That discarnate, dissimulating being stalked me from the attic to the barn and back again, and now he had found me here. It was his agency, I concluded, that was driving me into this living perdition, a waking delirium. He, who had long sought my ruin fiscally, now perhaps wanted to ruin my wits. As I sat in the chair, taking draught after draught of beer, my life seemed little more than a vulgar farce. Time eroded around me with a cruel and lagging leisure that merely intensified the angst of my surroundings. The agitation bubbled within me, urging me to take some action, any action, regardless of how wise it might have been. I reached over to turn on a lamp slightly beyond my reach. I leaned too far, causing the carpet to slip on the hard wood. I fell quickly, my elbows stabbing the floor and my teeth digging into my tongue with seismic excruciation. God damn it! I rolled over onto my back and loosened a terrible howl. Blood and curses streamed from my mouth. A steady flow of foul obscenities danced from my lips, and all interlinked in such clever manners that even in my anger I congratulated myself for my spontaneity. That half-second of pomposity gave birth to a silence between my ranting, and into that tiny silence came another sound, vibrating into me from behind the floorboards, the sounds of scratching and giggling. I officially lost my mind. I clenched my teeth and jumped up. In a burst of rage, I pounded my fist on the desk and swept everything on it to the floor. I smashed the beer bottle against the wall, knocked over the chair.
Where are you?
I yelled as I kicked an extra stage light, bursting the bulb.
Show yourself, you son of a bitch!
I ransacked the room, throwing anything that I could get my angry hands on. Costumes, props, speakers, cables, anything that wasn't out of the way fell under my hand. Then I saw the hat rack standing quizzically in the corner with its top hooks bent upwards like treacherous eyebrows. That shiny burglar, that honey trap, was habitually bent on stealing everything around me, perhaps now even my own sanity. It was staring, laughing at me from across the room. I rushed over and grabbed it despite its awkward size and, like a ram, battered it into a cluttered shelf. Drywall, mirrors, windows, all had to pay the price of being nearby, a frenzy that took no less than 5 full minutes. Finally, I became too tired to lift the damn thing. I was about to throw the rack when some internal rule seized hold of my mind and denied me the permission for such an act. As if holding an ancient vase or clay tablet, it struck me as unbearable to treat it in such a way. I looked around the room for a place to upend it and set it right. The few moments of this search cleared my mind of all anger. I finally leaned it up before falling to my knees, sobbing, shame slowly coming over me.
Where are you?
I said, as I surveyed the room and the destruction.
Am I to get the silent treatment, you bastard?
I sat there for several minutes in a whining, self-loathing silence, wondering if the next-door neighbor would call the cops. I reached for an old vest on the floor, knocked out of a box during the melee, and wiped the blood from my lips and tears from my eyes. Then in the silence came a moment of strange clarity. I looked down to see the red stain on the vest, but it was not just any vest, but one of those special ones. The chaos of my tantrum had disheveled the room, but with respect to the costumes, only a few had fallen to the floor. And in the clearest views, the hat rack's favorites, all of those much-talked-of articles of clothing that had spasmodically gone missing over the years, only to reappear later, hanging on its enigmatic hooks. The special costumes, rarefied by years of sweat-soaked performances. A scheme snuck into me, and as the idea congealed in my head, my mood became more and more delighted. Being of a sentimental nature, I had kept all of them. Even the most tattered rags were saved. A shirt here, a vest there, pants, and an old tan coat. But nothing was duplicated. Only at that moment did I notice the intelligent design of it all. The rack had not selected 3 shirts or 2 slacks. No, had not chosen 4 vests nor excluded a shirt. There was only one of each kind, a full yet motley combination that it clearly found suitable. I touched the clothes tree, running my hand along its cold metal hooks.
Oh, you picked these out, did you?
I asked the object without receiving a reply. It will be up to you to put things together, Clyde had told me before departing. Our next assembly depends on you. Yes, that's what he said. That was the secret, and I was embarrassed it had taken me so long to piece it all together. After all, that master of revels had possessed apparel before. His last incarnation had been a blanket. It appeared my mother had been right all along. Before I could taste artistic success, I would first need to make a living. I would do just that, starting with my own dirty laundry. With this plan in mind, over the next month, I prepared all the attire I believe Clyde had singled out. They were repaired, washed, and placed into a hamper where they could await the ritual. When the chosen night came, the sky was moonless, casting the world in resplendent darkness. I closed the window blinds and positioned the hat rack in the very center of the room. I looked down at the old, discolored garments. A carnivalesque assortment, worn, threadbare, yet special, each charged with 100+ performances. Dye would be needed to combine them into a new whole, to forge the accumulation into a fine-spun alloy. And after the look of its eyes, purple dye seemed the most appropriate. I used the only large container I could find, a wooden tub more like a barrel cut in half. I couldn't possibly boil enough water on the stove to fill it, but I had a plan for that. I decided to try a novel, though decidedly more dangerous method. A cheap grill in the backyard had been slumbering next to the rusty fence. I pulled the grill into the purple room, turned on the gas, and began heating chunks of brick upon the flames. It was dark. The dim quarters were illuminated by a tall torch-air lamp with a single bare bulb and the light thrown off by the burning propane. Once the blocks had smoldered for a spell, I tossed a few of them into the water, which unleashed a wild torrent of steam into the air. I held my bare hands above the rising vapors, feeling the warmth of the dew as it accumulated over my fingers. The room quickly heated, as had the water, filling it with humidity like a makeshift sauna. I added the dye to the mix and a cup of salt, giving the potion the look of frothy sangria and the smell of damp towels. Using the stage sword, honestly, it was just all I had handy, I stimulated the potion for a time. Slowly, one by one, I fed the chosen ones into the wooden cauldron, immersing them, drowning them completely. The moisture beaded up on the metal hat rack as the temperature in the room grew. The fabrics slowly absorbed the tincture, their original shades fading away. No longer were they individual pieces. They were now subservient parts of a greater whole, inwoven with a secret, alchemized into one. After stirring the mixture for some time in the hot dye, I desired to draw some of it out to test its color. I pulled out the greatcoat first and hung it on the old rack to dry. Pleased with its new appearance, I turned around and walked toward the kitchen for a beer before I noticed something strange. The dripping pattern, which had been slow and steady, had increased, and a new cloud of vapor poured into the space behind me. When I turned back, an incredible spectacle was unraveling. Indeed, it seemed as if all reality was unraveling. You see, the dark purple coat was alive. It climbed into the air as hot pigment flowed from its tattered stitching. Yes, it's true! And this was quickly followed by a waistcoat which buttoned itself together and rose as if its soul was hemmed into it. A pair of ragged pants lifted as well, yanked up over ethereal legs, followed by long strips of fabric which swarmed within the water like hungry lampreys. The empty contours began to billow and distend, its form divulged only by volume. Then gloves ascended. Bound together by twine, they unknotted, and while one hand grabbed the rack tightly, the other heaved more wet fabric from the bath and drew it over an invisible shoulder. A hemp belt slithered around its core as a matted wig untangled itself and bubbled forth from the collar. It was unfolding, complexifying before me, grasping the antique like a battle standard. It willed itself upward, the flames roaring behind it like a pagan brazier, casting its tall, disjointed shadow across me. The clothing was excited, like Fabritine capacitors releasing their emotional discharge. In shock and marvel, I fell to the floor while the raiment wreathed around the metal stand. It rose up in its full height and began to twist and contort itself, wringing out the dark Tyrian tannin. First it tightened and then went slack. All the while the heat and steam rose from its soaking form. My pulsation intensified. Whatever it was that I had beckoned here slowly reached over and seized a heated rock from the fire. A fierce throw plunged the stone back into the waters where it cracked and released a huge column of steam that enveloped it. With a spectral grip, it tore more of its wardrobe from the boiling basin. It was a cloak, heaping and hoarding the new scalding mass up and over its shoulders. And there he stood. Real. It's always been real. At long last, that which had sprung from my juvenile play, had overseen my dreams and lurked behind untold performances, was now physically before me. Riddlesbrood, fully formed. His boots shifted as if testing his new weight. Still cloaked in shadow, a glove took hold of the last item remaining, a curved hat, and set it upon his ratty weave. Slowly, he stepped out of the broth, out from the womb of vapors, aiming its eerie will, so much that I feared the look of his purple eyes, and so closed my own. When I opened them again, out of fear and part curiosity, he captured me in his gaze, a white face I recognized immediately. Clyde was grinning, smirking at me like a cheating gambler, his long three-pointed goatee sagging from his chin. His taunt, silent mouth cleverly bent rightward, as if in a grateful yet mischievous gesture toward me, his master upholsterer. I waited nervously for him to speak and received only a long-drawn silence. When I dared to move, his clenched mouth communed a muffled laugh. It was a dark, throatless chuckle, a rasp more evocative of damp rags smothering some victim's breath than of any earthly sound. I stared at him without expression.
Ah, you wish to continue our discourse. Good. We shall do so,
He said, without moving his mouth, proof that a mind could exhale. No sooner had I heard him than did the being smile and make a low, mordant bow. The room was hot and muggy, and the fleece I wore clung to me with an uncomfortable clamminess. My sweaty, tremulous hands moved compulsively within my pockets.
Have you your wits, boy?
He asked, raising an inky eyebrow.
I want some answers.
I returned. My apparent weakness annoyed the being. Then, in one loud lurch, he slammed the metal rack down and used it to drag himself towards me. A hollow glove darted up to grab my throat, its hot, wet grip paralyzing me.
Sloon a Zrebzarg. Ooh. Iranim et Zog. Lild aram chi sloon? Do not presume to be my equal, Scrimlander.
His grip loosened, and instinctively I winced as he threw me into the wall.
Please, no!
You summoned me here, yet it shall be you who grants me an audience.
The entity looked me up and down as I shook, paying particular interest to the symbol embroidered proudly on my chest, a figure suspended from an X with 3 tines at its left hand and 3 spheres at its right. This demon knows my emblem.
I am no demon, and that emblem is not yours, but mine,
he replied as the mist swirled about his soggy robes, and I opened my mouth in shock. Then, what does it mean? What is it?
What is it, you wonder, yet lack the courage to speak? You are disappointing and very slow to learn. Perhaps my lessons must again be drilled into you,
he said, prompting me to close my eyes and bring my hand to my temple.
Hearken! It is the form and the way, witless child. I sent no monsters here to torment you. You invite them at the top of your lungs!
I opened my eyes again to witness him raising his gloved hand. He held it up to me and closed it slowly into a fist, releasing a steady weep of violet.
Dreams have holes, and evil leaks. If you wish to banish the madness, then you had better avoid the shrink. Years shall pass, for every day you dawdle, and none of us shall survive another of your dark ages, least of all you.
He grabbed my fleece and tossed me toward the wooden tub. My hands splashed into the hot bath before I could react and pull them out. As I struggled to rise, he raised his hand to the point of one of the hooks branching off the coat rack and touched it threateningly.
Are you going to kill me?
I asked. He adjusted his dripping hair under his hat. The nylon threads had absorbed none of the dye, producing small beads of purple sweat that dripped from the wig's raveled ends.
Kill you? Ha ha ha! Have I a death wish? Must I breastfeed you, RDL?
At this, I fell backwards and covered my face. I was terrified and tried to form a pathetic response.
Shall I call you Clyde? Or do you prefer Riddlesbrood?
I am the penultimate, nearest to whom you speak,
he said.
And until you remember my true name, I will keep to myself.
The steam, still softly circulating beneath its garments, swirled into tight clouds pretending solidity. He leaned over, snatched another stone from the grate, and sank it into the tub, releasing a new nebulous mist.
But the squirrels?
I asked.
Gragrung. They are called Gragrung. And you have a false perception of them. Every intention, every daydream is potential existence. How do you think anything is made? All is created by consciousness, some greater, some small, but all matter. All substance musters to the music of thought.
The wraith leaned into the coat rack like a time-worn wizard, the metallic staff now a prop in more ways than one.
How do I know what's real?
That much depends on who is watching.
As if punctuating his words, he touched his face with his gloved hand, touching below his eyes and stretching them wider.
Your moaning melancholy alone is horrid enough, but spreading those gloomy thoughts in front of an audience magnifies it 100-fold.
Of course, that's why he guards the audience.
Most ignore their buried fantasies, dismissing the characters in them, all assuming, of course, that those forces are but figments. They dare not believe that these beings dreamed, these unseen specters, are brooding, frustrated intellects, gazing at them through the drywall. But they do.
At this point, he closed in on me, his steamy breath condensing on my face.
But why me?
I said, turning away.
It need not be. Perhaps you are too busy chasing squirrels,
he declared. I lowered my head and in a soft voice uttered a guttural sound that any lower primate would have acknowledged as submission. I stood silently facing him for perhaps a minute or two. Neither moved, neither spoke. We merely shared a bit of time and space together. There was a heightened sense of coexistence, not unlike watching a wolf in a cage, where both viewers know without stating that were it not for the bars, one of the pair would be food.
What am I to do?
He raised his arms up as if casting a spell. His gloved hands moved as though they were suspended by invisible strings.
Thoughts are the seeds of worlds. If abandoned, entire domains are devoured by chaos. And if misapplied, they create devourers of you. These truths you have seen already. So why are you idle?
He raised a glove to wipe the fog from his round spectacles.
You have auditioned, received the part, learned your lines, and are standing on the stage. Will you now not act? I might have perished in your forgotten land on the side of that sleeping mountain. But when Carthagust wakes, anything is possible. Even me.
He saw the script I had been writing on a nearby shelf and picked up some of my notes, warming them within his grasp. If it is possible for a fleshless face to smile, I believe his did so.
Have you learned the secret of the Brood's doom? The faces of gold? The faces of the crowd?
It's a language. They speak it in my dreams.
Truth indeed. Each face is a letter, and the many. What see you behind the many?
He asked.
Nothing.
He became visibly angry at that, and for the first time stood firmly on his own volition, thrusting the rack into the air like a trident, taunting the heavens.
Wrong! It is everything!
He roared loudly.
Heed my dooms! Thoughts are like rain pouring down from the unreal, emerging from clouds, effortlessly able to become both everything yet nothing. From such formlessness does creation reign, to roar down and soak the earth.
He exclaimed, pointing the rack toward me like a pike, barring my escape.
Here are my commands. You must strive that my Riddlesbrood players be fanatically dedicated to such, and to delight. You must creep silently into their hearts, pitch your tent, and once there, practice these grinning arts. Those who spar your movements shall leave with much inspiration and be filled with uncommon energies to face the drudgery of the days beyond. But be ever mindful, the brood must always perch dangerously where the laugh justifies the means.
The flames in the grill began to sputter as the propane ran dry, the gaslight dancing precariously around the dark walls. Boldly, I pushed the pointed hooks of the weapons away, surprising myself with my own valor and surmising that he was growing weaker.
I don't find any of this funny.
At this, he began to chuckle weakly, distantly, as if his very sentience was slowly riven from the nappy menagerie, drifting away with the mists.
Life is no laughing matter, but humor slips through defenses and under suspicions, and so it will be your design to try.
The steam dissolved further, and the cool of October intruded into the room.
Follow this, and doors shall open to you.
You're leaving?
Bring me a crowd, and stir them to laughter. Then you shall see me again, and you,
he said, as he once again lifted the old rack and spoke to it as if it were listening.
You old hood-hanger, wish-bringer, you were here to support me on this, my birthday. Forthwith you are mine, and shall serve no other.
It then seemed to address us together.
With you both by my side, I will always have somewhere to hang my hat.
At this, the noble essence leaned toward the metal post and collapsed into it, but not before he adroitly tipped his headpiece to me and set it on a hook. He then gently deflated, leaving only a cool puddle of dye on the floor and his damp violet costume draped upon the heirloom. The image of this, the golden clothes tree, agleam with wetness overhung by those dark, perplexing garments, reveals the real origin of the company's colors. To this day, they remain purple and gold. I stood there motionless, stunned and half expecting the get-up to do just that, but it merely hung there in silence. The flames in the grill finally ceased. The incident I have just relayed to you, I shall never forget. The event is eternally recorded in me, as though my eyes were limestone and a graver chiseled the scene on their very surface. My words cannot be justified with reason, I know, but only by a pure faith. In all the previous dreams, the ghostly visit, the golden faces, all forced me to expand my definition of the world. But this last vision, this I could barely process. What came into my bloodshot eyes that night followed the stalks into my lobes and burrowed deeper. A powerful sense of foolishness overcame me, as I knew I could never confirm what it was that had just occurred. Then I dropped my gaze to something sparkling on the well-watered floor, and saw upon closer scrutiny 3 charming faces winking at me from the bottom of a purple puddle.